In this lesson, we'll explore three key characteristics that affect a CPU's performance: clock speed, cache size, and the number of cores. By understanding how these factors influence a CPU's capabilities, you'll be better equipped to choose the right CPU for different computing tasks and design systems that meet specific performance requirements. The first characteristic we'll discuss is clock speed. Clock speed, which is measured in hertz, tells us how many cycles a CPU can perform in 1 second. Each cycle is a basic unit of work that the CPU does. A higher clock speed means the CPU can do more cycles in a given time, which usually leads to faster processing of data. Let's have a look at how clock speed affects performance. Clock speed has a big impact on how well a CPU performs single-core tasks. Higher clock speeds let a CPU complete individual instructions more quickly, which improves single-core performance. In tasks that use multiple cores, where the work can be split up and done at the same time, clock speed is still really important. Each core that's running on a separate core benefits from higher clock speeds, which makes the overall performance faster. As clock speeds go up, so does the amount of power the CPU uses and the heat it generates. CPUs with high clock speeds often need more advanced cooling systems to keep them from overheating. Keep in mind that there are physical limits to how much clock speeds can be increased due to limits with heat dissipation and power consumption. Manufacturers often reach a point where it becomes impractical to keep increasing the clock speed. For example, a CPU with a 3.5 GHz clock speed can handle tasks like running applications, loading files, and executing commands faster than a CPU with a 2.5 GHz clock speed. In gaming, higher clock speeds can give you better frame rates, and in data processing, they can reduce the time it takes to complete calculations. The second characteristic is cache size. Cache is a small, fast memory that's located right on the CPU chip. It acts as a buffer between the CPU and main memory, or RAM. Caches are usually faster than RAM, which means the CPU can access data it uses often more quickly. Now let's have a look at how cache size affects performance. A larger cache size means the CPU can store more data that it uses frequently. This reduces the time it takes to fetch data from the slower main memory, resulting in faster overall performance, especially for tasks that repeat a lot. The cache hit rate is the percentage of times the CPU finds the data it needs in the cache without having to go to the slower main memory. A larger cache improves the cache hit rate, which leads to better performance. Modern CPUs often have multiple levels of cache, like L1, L2, and L3, each with different sizes. The smaller, faster caches, such as L1 and L2, hold the most important data, while the larger L3 caches store extra data that's shared between cores. Increasing cache size comes at a cost, both in terms of the space it takes up on the chip and how complex it is to make. Larger caches can make the CPUs more expensive to produce. For example, in tasks like video editing or gaming, a larger cache can speed up data processing by reducing delays. Similarly, for multitasking or running complex applications, a bigger cache can improve responsiveness by keeping more data easily accessible, which leads to smoother and faster performance overall. The third and final characteristic is the number of cores. The number of cores in a CPU tells us how many independent processing units are on the chip. Each core can handle its own tasks, which allows for parallel processing, meaning multiple tasks can be worked on at the same time. Here's how the number of cores affects performance. CPUs with more cores can execute multiple tasks in parallel, which can significantly improve the performance of applications that are designed to use multiple cores. Tasks that can be split up into independent parts benefit the most from having more cores. While CPUs with multiple cores are great for parallel tasks, their performance on single-core tasks may not always be as good as CPUs with fewer cores but higher clock speeds. The operating system, or OS, has to efficiently manage and distribute tasks across multiple cores to fully take advantage of their potential. Applications that aren't properly optimized for threading might not take full advantage of the additional cores. CPUs with more cores generally use more power, especially when all the cores are being used heavily. The performance impact of these three characteristics can be increased or reduced when they're combined. It's important to have a balance between high clock speeds and enough cores. A CPU with a high clock speed and multiple cores can offer excellent performance for both single-core and multi-core tasks. A larger cache size is helpful for multi-core tasks because it allows each core to quickly access data it uses often. This reduces contention and bottlenecks when multiple cores are trying to access the cache at the same time. The impact of these characteristics depend on the workload. Different tasks might benefit more from higher clock speeds, larger caches, or more cores. For example, in video editing, rendering, or running virtual machines, a CPU with 8 cores will generally process tasks faster and more efficiently than a 4-core CPU. In gaming, while single-core speed is important, modern games often use multiple cores to handle complex calculations, resulting in smoother gameplay and better overall performance with a multi-core CPU.